This is the May 7th recording of the PCR NMRA Coast Division Saturday virtual event.
Anyway, so today we have kind of an exciting day. Really had four things. Wanted to talk briefly about the convention, just kind of review it for anyone who was there, opportunity to talk. I wanted to briefly talk about the May 22nd auction. I think everything's really getting in place for that. We actually have scheduled this afternoon a dry run with the equipment to make sure the equipment all works after being in storage for 2 years. Then we'll drop into just a quick show what you're modeling. And then, like I said, Bruce is going to talk to us about railroads of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. So with that, let me talk very briefly about the convention. There are, I believe, 135 attendees. I thought it was a very good convention. By the way, limited experience. The only other PCR convention I've been to is the one in Sacramento. But I thought this convention was equally good to that convention. The clinics I thought were generally very good. I thought Frank's clinic was excellent, where it was actually doing real modeling and getting people tools and the kind of thing you can't do virtually and you could never get online. Again, the layout tours were very interesting. I also took the tour of the sawmill. I'm going to pull a blank on the name now. I should remember it. It's Sturgeon's Mill, which, by the way, is the prototype that was used for the model created by Wild West Models, which you may have seen. Just an amazing model. They actually were running the sawmill. We were able to go underneath and see where the steam engine is. And quite frankly, I was very impressed by the auto speed control they had on it. So if anybody's interested, I can talk a little bit about that at some point. The contest, the thing about the contest that was most exciting was Earl Gerbavon brought his model, which Fran had participated with helping him on in 3D printing. It's a model of a coal loader. It was a picture he found of a coal loader somewhere on the East Coast. Basically, got rail cars on one side, and you've got a barge on the other side and an arm that goes back and forth. And he built 6 of those, and they're all 3D printed. They're all run with stepper motors. Each one has an individual Arduino running it, so they're all kind of unsynchronized. Then he built the power station that went with it. It was really a most impressive model. Took best in show, and kind of seriously hoping that he takes it to the national convention. And by the way, I put this in my lesson learned. I need to whack myself upside the head and take more pictures. I realized I went back and realized I just didn't take any pictures at all. I was just too busy talking to people and socializing. So that was kind of my mistake. Any comments on the convention?
My learning is saving money by driving up from Hayward to the convention was not smart. I was too tired, too exhausted, not able to visit and sit with people in a way I could have if I'd been up there. I'm in a situation where I'm helping care for my wife's elderly dad, so there was a driver to do that, but it did definitely take away from the convention. On the other side, it took out less from my wallet, but then I figured the cost of gas, and I should have probably just stayed up there.
I think you're probably right. Did anybody else go to the convention other than David?
Yeah, Phil, this is Bobby. I went up, and this was my first convention, and I second your sentiments. I really enjoyed it. The clinics, I did Frank's hands-on, which I thought was great. And I went to a couple op sessions, several tours. And my wife tagged along, and she found enough to occupy her time as well. So. It was a good time by both of us.
Cool. Yeah, I think it was a good time, and it really wasn't. The problem is the hotel room for. I was there, I think, for 3 nights, and I either 3 or 4. Hotel room is going to be expensive, but that's kind of life, I think. I agree with David. I thought at one point about whether to drive up and back, and it's a terribly difficult drive. We did it one time for a show at the fairgrounds there. It's maybe not in Roanoke Park. I think it's a little farther south for one of the great train shows. And, so we set up on Friday and did Saturday and Sunday, and I drove up and didn't stay up there. And I have to say that by the end of the weekend, I was pretty much a basket case. A lot of driving. So
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So anyway, it was very good. So the one thing, by the way, I'm just going to mention very briefly, we are the Coast Division going to do the 24 convention. We kind of made a general agreement. We're going to try to do it in Concord and kind of try as much as possible to reuse some of the work that was done before. Earl has volunteered to be very involved and probably will be a co-chair. So one of the things that is of interest, if someone's interested in being a co-chair, let me know, because if there is no one else, it's probably going to end up having to be me. So I have a personal interest in someone getting interested. And if you're interested in getting involved, either start thinking about clinics you'd like to do, or if you're layout. One thing very much we're doing, David is putting together I call it a database. It's really a spreadsheet, but it's basically a list of people that have raised their hand and said, I'd be willing to consider doing a clinic. And the idea is to try to create a ongoing repository of that information. Brian Booth and I have started doing the same for layout tours. Brian was coordinating the layout tours for Concord, and he gathered a lot of information. So one of the things is, if you have any information about a layout, that even if it's not your own layout, if it's somebody who's got a layout, let them know. Don't make it totally random, but let them know and pass their name and information on. Either myself or Brian will contact them, because one of the things we really want to do is get more layouts open, and do that more often when we're together. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the auction. So the auction is in 2 weeks and a day. I went ahead and decided we should just have a Saturday meeting. So we'll have a Saturday meeting on the 21st. I'm not sure how long it'll be, since we're going to have a physical meeting on the 22nd, but I thought it didn't make sense not to have it on the 21st. So we'll have a quick get together on the 21st at 9. The auction's on the 22nd. It's at the Elks Club in Alameda. It's on Santa Clara Street. It's right next to the City Hall and the police department, et cetera, in Alameda. The schedule kind of is, we'll start, doors should be open for drop off. It's around 9 to 9:30. We'll start setting up probably a little bit earlier than that. 10:15, we're going to have a clinic. David has volunteered to do a clinic about installing a DC decloder and a blue box Athearn diesel. That will be done 45 minutes to an hour or so. About 11:30, we're going to do a quick, short business meeting. Really not intended to be a business meeting, more intended to be an opportunity for a discussion with the folks who don't come to these Saturday meetings, and we have not had a conversation for a long time. The goal is to make that very quick and start the auction about 11:45. Kind of concerned about how many items we may get, though. Talking to Craig, there have not been as many early card signups as we thought there might be, so that may not be as much of an issue. Hopefully the auction will get done by somewhere between 2 and 3. We're actually setting up to have a couple of layouts open in Alameda. Right now, kind of the goal is either 1 to 5 or 2 to 5. They may be staggered a little bit, but the idea is, so if you go to the auction and you look around and you decide there's nothing you want to bid on, you can feel free to call it and leave and go look at the open layouts. And hopefully if the auction ends by 2:30, there'll still be plenty of time to stop by the layouts before leaving. If you need item cards, contact Craig. Craig can provide you item cards to fill out before the auction. I think we're getting close to having the volunteers we need, but if you're interested in volunteering, to do a back office function, I know one of the things we really need is someone to do data entry, maybe half-time. You may end up sharing it with me. This is actually taking the data off the cards and entering it in the program. So you're entering, what was the bidder number, what was the bidder amount, et cetera. So if you're interested in volunteering, contact Jer, let him know. If you can work halftime in one of the kind of more intense jobs, that'd be great. One thing that I wanted to ask is bring your NMRA card. We're going to do the setup on Saturday. It turns out that the way the software works, if you haven't been to an auction for, I think it's 3 auctions, basically the software deletes your assignment to a card number. And that was great when we were doing auctions all the time and people came to every auction. You never lost your card number. The problem is that as of right now, when we turn the software on, the software may very well believe that it's been 2 years, therefore all the card numbers get thrown away.
Hold it, Phil.
A point right now, guys, is I just ran through the auction card list. As of right now, everybody who was at the last auction, their numbers for the most part have remained. There are a few that I adapted accordingly, but for the most part, they're all up and current. I've been keeping the computer up to date, so I brought it up step by step, so everything was good.
That's
as of
great.
right now,
That's
if you
great.
had a number at the last auction, you're good.
That's good. That's great. Like you said, I wanted to make sure I told people because we were concerned about it. So if it's okay, you can ignore that then. But I always suggest carry your NMRA card all the time anyway. Are there any other comments or questions about the auction and the
Yes, sir.
22nd?
Yeah, I was wondering where you get these item cards. I've got some couple things I'm going to put in the auction.
So if you contact Craig, and if you look on the Coast Extra that you got yesterday, if you look at the email I sent you yesterday and read down through that, when you get to the auction parts, you'll see that Craig's email is in there.
Okay.
And if you guys give me a chance after I get done here and we go to the share, I'll go grab it and throw it in the chat also. But yeah, just contact Craig and he'll email you cards. David, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Yes, sir. For those of us that don't know our rear end from a hole in the ground in regard to the auction, is there some sort of document that is provides some orientation? I've got like something like this, and I have no idea how I get from here to somebody going, "Ooh, I want that." Is there some sort of
Simply put, David, there is a set of auction rules. I will have them printed out at the auction, but something like that, anything railroad or model railroad related is acceptable in the auction. That includes tools and paints and things and
All right.
artifacts. You have a small space to write a brief description of what you have on the card.
But like, do they have to be mailed in ahead of time?
No,
So
they do not.
David, stop. So David, the way it works is every item gets a card filled out. The cards have a number. You have to be given the card. You can get the cards one of two ways. If you've got a bunch of items and want to do it ahead of time, you can send Craig an email and Craig will send you cards for your items, and you can do it all at home. So when you drive over, every item has a card already in it. And then when you get there, you just put the cards will just go out on a table. The items and cards will just go out on a table. And the card basically has a number on it. You put your minimum bid amount on it. You put your number on it and you put a description. That's what Pat was saying.
Got it.
If you don't contact Craig ahead of time, when you show up at the auction, you can walk up and you will be given cards. You can get cards at the auction. You just have to fill them out there. You can't fill them out ahead of time then.
Got it.
So,
Hold it. Because I am doing the clinic, I want to. I'll contact Craig then to get
ping
cards.
Craig and exactly.
Okay. One other thing, David, do not put your seller number in there. Just leave that blank till you get there, and you will come and see me, Pat Latoris, and I will have all the bidder cards. I will issue you a number, so you will have an official bidder's number, and we can make things happen. So, and if you have questions at that point in time, I can walk you through it real quick. If I can figure it out, it can't be that complex. That's my
in other words, you're telling me that you're going to take away my name and give me a number, right?
So,
absolutely.
So Pat, that's actually a really important point that Pat made is if you have a bidder number from the past, I think Pat said you have a high probability you can use it. So if you get cards, you can use it. If you've never had a number, obviously you can't put a number in. So you won't be able to do that until you get to the auction.
Got it.
And I would advise anybody listening here to just leave that blank regardless and confirm the number when you get at the auction, just to make sure that we haven't had, because we had some adjustments. Some of the higher numbers got moved down to lower numbers to fill in blanks. So just to be safe, if possible, leave a blank. And if not, it's easy to correct. We'll just strike through and write your number on it. But I know you want to there'll be a space on there for your minimum bid. It's got to be at least $1 and put it in even dollar amounts. But yeah, that's the complicated part of it. And there'll be a claim check at the bottom that you will hold on to when your item is put on the table, because that will be how you get your money back. That's kind of important.
Thank you.
Okay. I have another NMRA issue to bring up.
Certainly.
I've got my bill for the dues for this next year.
Yes.
It's up to $76 for just a basic membership.
Was it 78 or 68? I thought it was 68. Because I have the thing right.
No, it's 68 plus $8 for PCR.
No, PCR is only if you want to subscribe to the branch line, which is now an online available to everybody, so you don't necessarily need that.
Right. And 60, as long as you're doing virtual subscriptions to all the magazines, I think it's 68.
Yeah, it's 68 base NMRA plus $8 for PCR.
No, that's $8 is a subscription to the branch line, the magazine.
If it were $68 for PCR and $8 for national, I'd pay it in a minute.
No, $68. No, again, as I said, that extra $8 is for a subscription to the branch line, which is online available.
It's $68 plus $8 for.
No, that plus $8 is for the subscription. You don't need that.
It's $8 for PCR.
No, it is not. There is no regional membership.
You look on the back of the form and notice your regional subscription.
Subscription, that's for the branch line. Leave that blank. Don't check that.
I don't care about the national magazine. It's crap.
No. The $8 is for the regional magazine, which is was a paper publication. If you don't want to subscribe for a paper publication.
Pat, you've been in the organization too long. I'm looking at it from outside. It's not worth it.
Thank you. We got that.
You're missing the point, but okay, go ahead.
Do it this way. So I don't know if you guys saw this. This is the do it this way. Yeah. This is the breakdown of where the $68 gets spent. So the $68 line is here. The 24 is if you want the magazine as a hard copy.
No, that's not included in the 68. That's extra.
The 68 is what's above the line here. So these items. So basically, this is kind of where that goes. There's 3% that comes back to the region. It is what it is. I still think it's a great value to be a member of the organization.
It's a great value to be a member of PCR. It's not a great value to be a member of the NMRA.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the two are co-linked. So, but I kind of looked at the $68. Is one of those things of, is there a benefit there that makes it? Obviously, most of the value is local, but in order to have that local value, you have to have that national umbrella. And there's well, no, but in order to support us, we really do, because there's a lot of things that come from that for us, like insurance. We couldn't have events. We could not have an auction.
I'll argue with this till the cows come home.
Okay. Well, I think there are lots of benefits and value to it. It's unfortunate that it's kind of what it is, but obviously those things may change over time. So anyway, so why don't we do it? Why don't we do this? Why don't we jump through? Does anyone have anything they'd like to share that they've been modeling, or any other comments? Joyce, go for it.
I have a question, please. I think that I was supposed to get a calendar from NMRA and for this year, and I don't think I got mine. Has anybody else had this problem, and who do I contact?
I think I saw something in the National Bulletin about they had a problem with the mailing, and they gave you a contact to who to contact if you didn't get it.
But if you
it was about 2 months ago or so in the national.
Yeah, I think if you contact Ginny at the national office, she can point you the right direction.
What's that?
If you contact Ginny at the national office, she can probably point you in the right direction.
Can you spell that name or put it in the chat?
Jenny. Jennifer. Yeah, but she's the
Thank you.
one, she's the office manager,
Okay,
and she's
Thank you.
good. Not a problem.
okay.
Hey Joyce, a friend of mine wanted to know when you're going to have another bluegrass concert somewhere.
Well, my family reunion,
I don't know if that counts.
we're doing a family reunion. I'm making a CD, and so we hope to release a CD, but it will be love songs, not train songs. And for train songs,
They aren't the same?
What?
They aren't the same? I mean, I always thought they were the same. What's the difference?
That's true. That's true. I'll put your name, Bruce. I usually will come on and announce if my band's going to perform, but we are just starting to get back to real visits because singing involves,
Breathing.
more risk. And so we're just now starting to get back to practicing, and we're surprised that we haven't lost more than we have, but we've been practicing every single week on Zoom, but it's not the same. So
Okay.
the answer is soon, I hope.
Okay. Well, Steve Lane, who's on this meeting, I believe, he's the one that asked about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Well, with that, I'm going to throw it open for folks to show what they've been modeling. And I think Fran was holding something up, so I'm going to point to Fran first and spotlight him and see what he was showing us.
So I'm getting closer on my Plymouth HL model. It's a 20-ton Plymouth. This version so far, I don't have like the window sills, the window dividers in, and the some of the detail. But let's see, I can share photos that are probably better than this if you want, Phil.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, enable sharing.
Oh, I got to enable it. I'm sorry. There you go. You're good. Ready to go.
Okay. So that's the, I think, central Pacific coast. Come on. There we go. So it's I am 3D printing it, and I find photos of versions with the Plymouth written on the side on the castings, and I find some versions that are called the exact same thing, Plymouth HL2, that have the just the like a open frame on the side. So I'm gonna take a look at both of them. That's over here on the left. They're the pieces that fit inside the windows. This piece up top will be a latch that you put on the bottom of the top hood, so that you can pop the hood on and off to get at any electronics that you have under the hood. Same thing. So this one in the background there, that's the open frame. I'm not sure which one I like best, so I got them both there for now. Yeah, getting close. That's the Northwest Short Line Stanton Drive that fits it nicely.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go. And that's it.
Cool.
Looks neat.
And that's in ON3 and ON30.
Fran, that's really good. That's showing the real technology to advantage.
Thank you.
Kind of like having a actual manufacturer here showing us the process, because I imagine that's going to be a kit someday.
I'm seriously considering it, and I'm seriously saying, what the heck am I doing with all my time? You know, it takes a lot longer than I even realized, and this is probably my 7th or 8th locomotive that I've made up for 3D printing, and I thought this would be done 2 months ago.
Any other modeling shows here? Anybody else? Anything interesting to show?
I can tell you about my last modeling. I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to build a boxcar from a Tichy kit that required the drilling of 72 holes for grab irons. And I have used about 12 different or 12 drill bits have broken in that process. It was painful.
Okay, well, I guess if there's nothing more, we're going to jump straight into Bruce. And so thanks to Bruce, he's volunteered to do a clinic on the railroads of the Concord Naval Weapons Station and talk a bit about that. I found, like I said, Fran had done a locomotive from one of the powder works up there, you know, on the North Bay along the whatever you call it, the river going up from the Bay Area up towards Sacramento. And there's a lot of interesting industry up there. And clearly the Naval Weapons Station was a very interesting one. So Bruce, I'm going to throw it over to you and let you take over.
All right. Let me just ask you the sequence of button pushing. Do I first?
Do you want to share something?
Yeah.
Okay.
PowerPoint.
So if you want to share your screen, click where it says share screen down at the bottom where it's green.
Yeah, that's my question. Do I hit that first or do I hit the PowerPoint icon first?
Go ahead and just share. Click share.
Okay.
And then when that opens, you'll see a whole bunch of little pictures. The upper left is actually go ahead, throw it in slideshow mode and let's see if it goes into slideshow mode. On the bottom right, go all the way down to the bottom right. On the bottom right, far right, down on the toolbar.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that one there. Click that one right there. Okay. There we go. You're all set. You're good to go.
Thank you for that.
Thank
you. I moved to the Bay Area from Wisconsin in '81 to go to work for Southern Pacific in management, and I moved to the Concord area and I noticed tracks swirling around the hills. And I said, what is that? Here I am on the brink of suburbia and I see this railroad with all these tracks swirling about. So anyhow, I became very interested in the Concord Naval Weapons Station Railroad. And by way of introduction, let me just read a paragraph or two from an article I wrote for Trains and Railroads of the Past magazine. And then we'll get into the slideshow itself. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Tucked away in the hills below Mount Diablo State Park, about 40 miles east of San Francisco, California. Let me change glasses here. Was a railroad operation that not only holds historical significance in this country's experience, but one that offered uncommon rolling stock, distinctive operations, bucolic scenery, unique structures, provocative track configurations, and plenty of local history. Excuse me. This was the Naval Weapons Station Concord Railroad inland operation. The phone rang and a deep voice answered, "Hello," I said. "Is this Will Comer?" He responded, "Yes, what's left of me," he responded in a tongue-in-cheek manner. Just then I knew this was going to be a good conversation, not from just the humor I detected in this nonagenarian, but recognizing I had made contact with someone who intimately knew a railroad that had been cloaked in mystery, at times touched with controversy, and most importantly, played a key role in the nation's defense system, as history can attest. Okay, with that, let's go to the presentation. So we hope to touch in this presentation on some history, signs and security, facilities, topography, locomotives, rolling stock in the future. We're in the Green Hills of beautiful Northern California, where waves of green furrows flank the tracks. You can see a track in the foreground there. In fact, 2 layers. Just some bullet points on the significant events. '27 Navy considers establishment ammunition facility in the Bay Area, in Pearl Harbor in '42. They purchased 577 acres, Port Chicago. Pier 1 becomes operational in November '42. First shipment of ammo sets sail for Port Chicago in '42. Pier 2 construction in '44, 6,000 acres acquired for the inland area in '44 May. Port Chicago explosion. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Many were killed, mostly African Americans. Inland area completed in June of '45. Construction begins for additional sidings, 550 ammunition cars. That was in July '45. Facility assumes responsibility of shipping ordnance for U.S. Army in the Pacific in May of '47. Excuse me. And other wars follow, in which the Concord Naval Weapons Station played a role, Korea and Vietnam. And the inland area is closed in November of '05. I'm sorry, I'm getting this sinus drippage. So here we go. Here's Pier 1. You can see that this was a self-contained village, having everything from barbershops to a chapel. Give you a second just to read the top there. Here's an overview map. We'll see more of these. I'm particularly focused on the inland area in this slideshow because that's the area that hosted the hills and the steep grades and loop tracks and so forth. The other area is called the tidal area, and that's still in operation. This is a identification of the ammunition storage groups in Bunker City, as it was known. We'll see more pictures of that. Now, just to give you an idea, let me give you some background. It was a real challenge to get into the Concord Naval Station. It took me literally years of writing letters, dealing with bureaucracies, the military, the city of Concord, and so forth. And you could see that it's been a very highly restricted area for obvious reasons. I mean, they had everything from missiles to nuclear type items purportedly in the base. Consent to be searched. Threat of prosecution if you trespass. And other warnings from the Department of Defense. And yet a welcome sign. Note the layers of track, which you'll see throughout the presentation. This is where you come into the place off Port Chicago Road. This was the main interchange point with the various railroads, the Sacramento Northern, the Southern Pacific, and the Santa Fe. This sketch was done by Robert Campbell, who I believe is now deceased, but it's a pretty good slide. You can see how complex the interchange work was to get cars into and out of the base. A friend of mine, Tom Ferens, snapped this picture of a Baldwin on the Navy Railroad, the flyover over the Santa Fe and the SP. And those three classic Navy boxcars in tow. This was Pam Ramirez. She was the one that took me on the tour through the base. And she was very helpful. Part of that's cut off, but we're looking south. And on the left, you can see the engine repair facility, steam cleaning shed, the public works building, and motor vehicle repair, and storage for flammable materials. And the traffic jam up on Highway 4, which has not changed. It's the engine house, the service track, Quonset hut. Just another view of the same thing. The warehouse. Here's a siding being spotted with 3 boxcars. There's another overview from Google Maps of Bunker City and the hills. Now note the lower right corner, the tracks swirling and curving like a snake. We lived across from the Concord Pavilion, and we'd walk to a ranch land back there off Blue Rock Circle, and you could see the tower for the Concord Naval Station there, the watchtower. This is where they dispatch trains. And there was a place where crews could report there. I call this a spur tree symmetry for obvious reasons. This is part of the yard. I thought it had interesting photo possibilities here. This is a revetment, again with layers of track above. Now these were built such that if there was an explosion, obviously the forces would go up, not out, to minimize damage. Note the little switch stand there. Here you have cars spotted within the revetment. And those cars had special features to protect against any kind of sparks that might be had, triggering an explosion. Huddled safely in the earth, I have here. Boxcars in the revetments like sentries. Close-up of one of the switch stands. They had cattle guards. And as you'll see, they also had elk roaming around.
Bruce, are you going to talk about kind of the flow of cars into the revetments and how long they were stored there and that, or?
Well, yes and no, I guess. The ammunition would come in and go out via this railroad to be loaded on the ships on the piers. But I think the main thrust of this presentation is to give you a sense of the geography and topography of the railroad, which is what's attracted me to it. So I guess the answer is sort of, but not really. Sorry. Okay, anyhow, Thule elk. Here you'll note a close-up on this map of the tracks that interested me that swirled about the hills. This steep grade off Bailey Road fascinated me, and can still be seen today, I believe. I'm kind of a track guy. I like complex track. In fact, I did a presentation for the Steel SIG out east on special track work, both prototypic and HO scale. Quite a unique place, as you can see, with the mountain landscape in the background. Now note the 4 levels of track here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've never seen anything like that. I've been to a lot of railroad scenes in my day. Here's Bunker City with tracks looping around. Another view of the bunkers. Note the rails in the concrete in the foreground. S-curves sweeping around.
Question for you, Bruce.
Sure.
In this facility, was it where people were forklifts running around getting stuff off the cars into those bunkers, or were people just Armstronging stuff around on carts and such? You don't, just curious.
Well, I don't know the details of that. I was more interested in the overall layout as opposed to the process.
I got a little involved with the process for this,
Good.
partly because I worked for PFE in 1973 when the Navy blew up Roseville, and the cars that were destined for Port Chicago facility. But I took a look at it, and I actually built a model of one of the replacement cars for the 1944 explosion. But what it was is munitions would be shipped from all over the United States to this depot in Concord, and there they'd have to be stored and sorted around and kept until the ships were ready to take them on board to take the munitions to wherever in the Pacific they were going. So this was essentially a huge holding yard for explosives. And they kept the explosives inside the cars as long as possible to avoid handling. So they would store them inside cars, and they'd keep these cars on the site. Most of the cars were not used in interchange. They actually would bring in other box cars, sometimes Navy cars, sometimes just regular commercial box cars, and then transload them to the set of cars that they kept for storage here in this large inland yard, and in the bunkers and so forth. There's a lot of history goes on here back in the 1970s of protests against the Vietnam War, where there were protesters blocking this, and also a lot of concern because nuclear weapons that were stored there as well before transshipment. Anyway, the idea was that you bring in on regular freight car loads into Concord, and then transship to these storage box cars, which would then be kept in this large yard or in the bunkers if needed. And then when the ships were ready to take them, then they would be moved from this yard to the piers out into the Carquinez Strait, where they would be transloaded to the ship.
Two modes here, right? There's the carload mode, where if there's a carload of armaments for a ship, it would be loaded as a car and stored as a car until it was moved to the ship. Then it seems like a lot of the munitions were probably stored in less than carload in the bunkers and were then loaded into a car for the ship based on when they were needed.
Right.
Sounds like probably very interesting to look at how they move stuff around. Probably a very interesting operating schema within the facility.
One of the things that happened after the 1944 explosion, the Navy went all over the US looking for wood boxcars. And it wound up with quite a few from the Rio Grande. These were standard gauge 36-foot length cars that were obviously now surplus, even though it was during the wartime. And the Navy wanted wood cars because it would cut down on the possibility of sparks from steel cars. If you knock steel against steel, you can get a spark. But if they used a wood car, that was much less likely to blow up.
I wish I had known you, Ken, when I started the project. That's very interesting. It was very difficult finding people that had knowledge of this facility and operation. Very difficult.
Yeah. Here, I put something on the chat, a reference to my personal blog site, where back in 2018, I built a model of one of the cars. Interesting enough, there are two cars from this that were used at the Port Chicago facility, sitting up in the Western Railroad Museum up in Rio Vista. And they were donated by the Navy after they were declared surplus.
Interesting.
And I've got there in that Blogspot article, there's actually a couple pictures of those. I was able to get into their storage sheds up in Rio Vista and get some of the full data on the cars, including the fact that they still had the brake cylinders, the brake reservoir cylinders, lettered still were in the gray paint of the Navy and lettered for the last Navy inspection.
Oh, yeah. Do you think in a future meeting you could bring the model you built? In a future meeting, could you bring the model? Did I understand you to say you built a model?
Okay. Yeah, you can look at it actually right now. As I say in the chat, I put a URL to where my blog site.
Okay, thank you. I believe this is where they handled the missile parts, and the track went into the facility there. You can see this from Kirker Pass. There's a pull off there that you can pull off and get a good view of this. Here's a lone tank car up in the hills. Probably a fire car. Now here's some of the locomotive stock. I believe those are Jeep 10s. Army has charge of the base now by this time.
Are these in Rio Vista?
Are they in Rio Vista? Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
These are down by the tidal area.
What year was this picture of these locomotives taken, Bruce?
I was there in '07.
Thank you.
It's hard to remember back. I had to do a lot of research to just remember when I was there, but a lot of time has passed. Now, we interviewed, Steve Lane and I, Will Comer, who you'll see at the end of this. He started out as a trackman and a brakeman, conductor, engineer, ended up being a supervisor. And he lived in Concord. We tracked him down for many of his stories. He started out in the 40s at Mare Island and then was transferred to Concord Naval. And he had some great stories to tell. And he always liked, he'd rave about the Baldwins and how they were superior to the Alcos or the EMDs. Nice Nathan P3 chime whistle. And a K3, Nathan. Kind of a whistle buff too. The old and the new. These manuals were interesting. Can't read the top there. Before any car containing explosives or other dangerous material is moved, the car doors must be closed. Well, that's pretty obvious. Engines must not remain in front of buildings containing explosive or dangerous materials longer than necessary to spot cars. Rule 133, 134, evacuation. So this was dangerous stuff. And I'm sure most of you heard about the explosion. And I think it was 44 when over 300, primarily African Americans, were killed. Then there was a labor sit down over that. There's an evacuation plan. All personnel familiarize themselves with the evacuation plan for railroad cars and be ready to carry out the plan when a report of fire or disaster is received.
Particularly after the 1973 Roseville explosion.
Yeah,
They were conscious of this stuff.
I remember that, hearing about that. Here's the mention of the Sacramento Northern. Item C. Now, this was my favorite piece of rolling stock. I'd never seen anything like a laundry car before. This would make a nice model with that robin's egg blue color. And that was in service, of course, for the Navy there. We called it a laundrette. This was in later years. I was able to snap that shot of those silver box cars. This was their fire car. That'd make a nice scratch build. and their older water car. Here are the bunkers today, kind of forlorn, with so much history behind them. So they're going to develop the real estate there now, as you probably know. We wanted to see some of the track and bunkers preserved and lobbied for that, but good luck on that. I think they are going to preserve something down the road.
For built-in bomb shelters for the homes they build.
Exactly. And this is a view from Kirker. Now that's Will Comer. He's the guy, he was in his 90s. He's since passed away, but Stephen, thanks to Stephen, who made contacts, Steve Lane, recorded him on what he remembered about working there. He was, as I mentioned, a supervisor, and he's quite a character. And he tell us about the times during, I think it was the Vietnam era, when there were so many cars, there were like 100 cars, just bottlenecking the entire facility. It was so hard to get around. So he had a lot of good stories in the past. He's from Missouri originally. Now I was in desperate search to find pictures of the locomotives operating in the hills. They'd operate with, their limit was 3 cars, as I understand it. And they occasionally might double, had some locomotives getting up into those steep grades, which could reach 3 or 4%. Steve and I went through the files there and obtained some good track maps of the place, indicating the radius of curves and grade percentages. But what I was leading to is it was just, excuse me, almost impossible to find photo documentation of trains operating in the hills. Now I contacted his son, and Will Comer's son, that is. That's who you're looking at here is Will Comer. And to inquire whether in Will's estate he had any photographs of the railroad. And the son was going to look, but I did not hear back from him, unfortunately, because I'd love to find a picture of a train operating in those hills. This was our GO team. That's Al Malik on the left. Pam, Al's a rail fan, where he's in this meeting now, perhaps. And we go to his house every Friday for an ops session. And he's very serious and formal about those operations, let me tell you. In the middle is Pam Laprachia. She was and still is a city, well, maybe she's not still there anymore, but she was with the city of Concord, and she was a key person with whom we coordinated. On the far right, that of course is Steve Lane. He's a director of the Clayton Museum and an expert on the Bay Point and Clayton Railroad, which had the first route into the naval station. Let me grab some water here. And the Navy took over from the Bay Point and Clayton Railroad. And hopefully someday Steve will have time, he's a busy guy, to do a presentation on the Bay Point and Clayton. That track is still visible off Bailey Road in California, signature California poppies, of course. I wrote an article, that's the magazine I read from, in the fourth quarter of 2019, Trains and Railroads of the Past, otherwise known as TRP magazine, on the railroad. Neither of those photos on the cover are of that railroad, but you can see there the article is mentioned on the cover. If you're interested in the military and or railroad history of the facility, this is a superb book written by Minister John Keivel, who was kind enough to afford us lots of information and photos, etc., of the Concord Naval Weapons Station. They used to carry this at Berkshire Books in Concord. I think it's out of print, but maybe you could find one on the internet. It's a fascinating book. That's it.
A question, if I may, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
In the facility, the people that ran the trains and such, were they railroad union men and women, or was it a separate force of workers that the Navy employed directly?
Ken might have a comment on this, but it was my understanding that they were civil service employees.
Civil service.
At Vandenberg in the 70s, they were a mix of some military officers that were trained, you know, like second lieutenants and lieutenants, and some civilians. Bruce, was your first slide, the opening slide had, I think, a Plymouth on it. Was that of the station?
Is that the slide of the picture of the train on the pier?
It's a train. I didn't quite make out where it was. I think it may have been was it an evening or a dark slide?
Let me see if I can find that.
May well have been a pier.
That one? Is that
you're
what
not,
you're referring to?
well, you're not shared, but
Oh, I'm not.
it looked like a Plymouth.
Let's see. So I got.
You'll have to share again, Bruce. When I started the question, the share was just a black screen, so you have to share again.
Okay. Share. Okay.
And sure alike.
Yes, that's the one. It's
Bigger.
hard to make out. It's pretty small, but so that is on the pier.
Oh. Yeah, tried to make it bigger, but yes.
Go back to the slide and start the slideshow on that slide. Yeah, go back to this. Click on the slide that you've got there.
There it is. And do I click on this?
That one right there. Yep, click that icon right there. There you go. That's as.
Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. I'm still guessing whether it's Plymouth or Whitcomb, but yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's okay. I see it's a pier. It looks like a Liberty ship or a Victory ship out there.
Yes.
Was this before or after the explosion? Or do we know?
It's not dated.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting to think about. It was not one of the ones that blew up.
Yeah, or it could have been.
That shot is before the explosion.
Yeah. So there were probably two ships on a pier like this that went up together.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a controversial place, as I mentioned, and I think Ken, someone alluded to it earlier, where someone sat on the tracks protesting the Vietnam War, and he had the same name as one of the Beach Boys, Brian, whatever, and he lost his leg doing that. You know, you can't stop a locomotive like you can the cars. It's unfortunate.
I want to mention a little bit of family history that I'm reminded of seeing this picture. If you look between the boxcar and the large building, you can see some guns on the apparently the stern
Yeah.
of that ship. My wife's father, Raymond Huntsman, was a fellow who was a merchant marine and was in charge of the gun crew for one of those guns. And he was in the water twice in the Pacific.
Yeah.
The ship sunk from under him.
Gee.
He was a changed man when he came back from the war. But I thought of those guns and I thought of Raymond Huntsman. Just a bit of family history that comes to mind.
Mm.
Anti-aircraft guns on those ships.
So Phil, is this presentation going to be available to members at the website? The recording?
I'll go ahead and take this and break it out as a separate little piece and put it up on the YouTube channel. So it'll be on YouTube. It's not really on the website. It's on YouTube.
I see.
But what I'll do is I'll break it out as a separate piece. So it'll, generally what I do, and quite frankly, I'm not very good at getting this done quickly, is generally we'll put the meeting up as a meeting, but then take this and that you've done, Bruce, and break it out as a separate piece.
I was just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. No worries.
Bruce, thank you for all the legwork and politicking you did to get the pictures and the materials and the knowledge you gained to this facility.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely super. Absolutely super.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Very, very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of kind of the formal part of the agenda for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording now and just let it be open for anyone to have any conversations. So everyone have a great week. Mark your calendars for the 22nd, and we'll see you in 2 weeks on Saturday before the auction on the 22nd. So cool.
Thank you.